Hello friends, welcome back to Heartscapes, where we're practicing the system of Reiki at the intersection of self-reflection, spiritual practice, and social action. My name is Michaela. Welcome back to the studio. This video is the second in what will be an ongoing series of videos where I get to respond directly to questions that come through other videos, through classes that I teach, through conversations with folks. Just give us a place to collect responses to direct questions that you all have. And so if you are watching any other video on this channel, including this one, and a question comes up, something that you are curious about, something you're confused about that I say, a question you have about your own experience, a resource that you need, just something interesting that catches your attention, you can go ahead and drop that question into the comments if you use the hashtag AskHeartscapes, all one word. That'll make it easier to find, but you can drop a question in any video and I will gather them up and periodically release one of these Ask Heartscapes videos where we can explore that. So the first video in this series was the beginning of a response, a kind of a longer response to a question that I often get asked related to the structure of the system of Reiki. Now, I first trained in Reiki from the Western perspective, like many of us, most of us who are trained in the system of Reiki. What we first encounter is the form of Reiki that has developed here in the United States, in Europe, in the West generally, that really came out of the Western, kind of melting pot integration of Reiki into America. There are historical reasons why the Japanese elements, the very specifically Japanese spiritual origins of the system were subverted at that time when Reiki was brought into the country. That could be the topic for another series of questions if you are interested. But for now, what we'll focus on is the fact that in this migration of Reiki into the West, much of its spiritual foundation was lost. And the forms that grew up in its place in America and the West truly took on very different characteristics. Blended pieces from lots of different traditions, as we tend to do in this melting pot of a country. I have thoughts about that. It's problematic, the way that we tend to assimilate cultures. Probably also a topic for another video. But the outcome being that the Western form of Reiki is really quite different from its Japanese origins. And so oftentimes when I mention to people who have some Reiki training or some exposure to Western Reiki, and I mention that the system of Reiki is composed of 5 elements and then a series of practices for each of those elements that all work together in a coherent system, people often ask, well, what are those 5 elements? I've never heard of that. I'm really only familiar, I thought Reiki was primarily, hands-on healing work. So what are these other elements? So that's what we're walking through in this series. In the last video, which I'll link down below, I talked about, just very briefly, an introduction to the cultural landscape that the system of Reiki exists inside of. Just acknowledging that any system of thought or system of practice or philosophy or religious tradition is going to exist inside of a very specific cultural context, a particular worldview, a way of understanding things, and that all matters to how we relate to the system, and particularly if we're a practitioner or teacher of it. So I go over those 6, very simple, leaving out a whole bunch, but just 6 simple pieces of framework that are important for us to understand before we look at the 5 elements of the system. Those 6 end with an acknowledgement that the precepts, the first element in the system, describe the purpose and the outcome of the whole system. That we have right there in the precepts a description of our intended purpose for working with the system, that purpose being to alleviate suffering inside of ourselves and those that we're connected to. And that the whole rest of the system of Reiki centers on those precepts and is designed to help us to embody those precepts in our life, to bring them into an active form in our daily life. So, what are those precepts, right? So, the first element of the system is a series of 5 precepts, 6 if you include the kind of container of all of them. And these precepts are really believed to be a distillation and a secularization of the Eightfold Path of Buddhism. This Eightfold Path that describes the pathway out of suffering and into enlightenment, into satori, into a state of being where we are unattached to suffering. And the Reiki precepts are directly related to that. They give us a vision of what that actually looks like in our day-to-day life. How would we feel? How would we behave if we had achieved a state of being released from suffering? And so the way that this is described in the precepts, the translation from Japanese into English can be taken in a lot of different directions. This is one of the challenges of the challenges and the really like intriguing creative endeavor that is translating from a very poetic, very metaphoric, very circular and spiraling kind of language, such as Japanese, into a much more linear, fact-based, direct, structured form of language like English. English doesn't do well with the kinds of poetic, metaphoric descriptions that are commonplace in languages like Japanese. English is very good at giving us directions and clearly describing things, but we struggle a little bit here. So as a result, there are often many different ways that a phrase or a word in Japanese might be translated into English. But in the form that I typically use and that, is pretty straightforward, the precepts are: just for today, I anger not. Just for today, I worry not. Just for today, I am grateful. Just for today, I am diligent in this. Or sometimes I use the translation, just for today, I am true to my way and my being. And finally, just for today, I am compassionate to myself and all others. Now, when I first received these precepts in my very first Reiki class, 9 years ago or so, they were presented almost as an afterthought, almost as kind of a sideshow to the main event, which is the hands-on healing aspects of the system of Reiki, which is really the point of focus for Western Reiki. My early Reiki education really didn't include this kind of context. And so I was given these precepts and said that they're important to the system, but I didn't understand why. It was this list of nice things that seemed like good advice. Sure, be grateful, be compassionate, don't be afraid, don't be angry, be diligent. Sure, that's all great. What does that have to do with the point of hands-on healing? Well, it turns out it has everything to do with the point of the system of Reiki. Because again, this describes the outcome that we are seeking when we practice all the other elements of the system, including Tenohira, or hands-on healing, which is indeed one of those 5 elements. So just for today, I release attachment to my fear and to my anger. Just for today, I am grateful. Just for today, I am diligent in my focus on my gratitude and my releasing of attachment to fear and anger. Just for today, I am compassionate to myself and to all others. And notice compassion there at the foundation of the rest of the precepts. If you look at them written out, compassion is right there at the foundation. And I often like to envision the precepts, the words of the precepts as a structure, as a tree that's well rooted, or as a well-built building that has a nice, strong foundation. Because compassion to ourselves first and foremost, and then by extension to all others, is the foundation of this system. It is the purpose. It's where we're heading, right? So many spiritual traditions that come out of the human experiment on this planet have love at their foundation, right? It shows up everywhere. And here in the system of Reiki, which comes out of Shinto and Buddhist roots, we have compassion right there at the foundation of our guiding precepts. So it's all about the precepts. That is the whole point, right? Now, how do we get there, right? We get there through practice, because while that's a nice list and it seems nice and simple, if we think about what would it take to actually live our whole life, every moment of our life, unattached to fear and anger, just allowing those feelings to come in, give us information, and then move out of our system without causing us to respond out of fear, to respond out of anger, to hold on to it, to let it take up residence in our heart and mind. How often does fear or anger take up residence in our heart and our mind and impact how we think about things, how we feel about things, and the behaviors that we engage in, right? What does it take to resist that response, to relax, to loosen up our attachment to those feelings and let them pass through and move along? What would it take to truly be aware of gratitude in every moment, to allow that sense of true appreciation for what is true in this moment? Let that dissolve any sense of sadness, any sense of grief, any sense of, holding on to the things we wish we had. What would it mean to be true to ourselves in every decision that we make? And at the same time, be deeply compassionate to ourselves and to all others. What would it take to live our life that way? It's simple, but it's not easy, right? And so knowing that, we have this full system of practice that allows us gently, step by step, sometimes not so gently. I've had some not gentle tussling with the precepts at times, but generally speaking, over time, when we're diligent and we stay with the practice, it's a gentle, easeful journey along the path of these precepts. And what we find is that moment by moment, in small moments, in bigger moments, in specific interactions that we have, we start to notice that we're less attached to fear and anger. We start to notice that gratitude is more present in our awareness. We begin to notice that we're being more diligent about our practice. We feel more true to ourselves as we practice. And we're able to hold compassion for ourselves and, by extension, for others more consistently. And this is the thing that I love about this system, is that it's not an all or nothing proposition. In fact, non-duality is an incredibly important concept from the Buddhist tradition inside of the system of Reiki. If you're interested in exploring that one, #AskHeartscapes. It's not an all or nothing proposition. Every moment, every flash of insight that we have where we're experiencing, embodying those precepts in any moment of our life benefits us, right? It lets go, it releases a piece of suffering that we're carrying. This is what's so inviting about this system, right? It's not like either you're suffering or you're enlightened. Those are your two options. It's like, in any moment, just for today, how am I experiencing my life? How am I showing up with the decisions that I'm making? So that is the precepts. And as I said, each of the 5 elements has a series of practices that are specifically aligned with that element and that intertwine with all of the other elements, all of the other practices. It's a very well integrated system, as you can imagine. There are a series of contemplation practices with the precepts. The precepts, being a system of words, is very associated with the mind, with the voice, and integrating the mind, the voice, and the body is one of the other goals of the system of Reiki. We might do a video on that one. And so the practices that are specific to the precepts are contemplation practices, so practices of the mind, and chanting practices, practices of the voice and of the resonance of the voice in the body. I have another video that walks you through one of the foundational breathing practices, another element of the system. and a precepts contemplation. I will put that link down below if you want to give it a try. And then chanting the precepts, typically in Japanese, is the other very important and common practice specific to the precepts. I'm not going to do any chanting right at this moment. I actually spent most of the morning chanting, and my voice is a little worn out at the moment. So I won't subject you to that, but I do want to speak the precepts in Japanese as our closing for this video. I can tell you right now, we are answering one question that I had, which was, can Michaela make a concise video that's under 10 minutes? So far, no. We're at 16 minutes on this one. Maybe I'll edit it down. I have never claimed to be concise. It's just not part of who I am. I'm so sorry. However, we will end this video now, and I want to just end it by speaking the precepts in the original language that they came to us in. There is a special magic, a special juiciness of particular vibration to words, to sounds and language. And so speaking it in the language of its origins matters, and chanting it in those from that language is a really wonderful practice. So let's just hear it in Japanese to close our time together. 今日だけはいいからな、心配すな、感謝して、行を励め、人に親切に、今日だけは。Friends, thank you for being with me on this little excursion into the precepts. I will release the next one shortly, where we will be looking at the next element of the system of Reiki, which is breath work and meditation. So join me for that journey. Take a look at the video down below. Give the precepts contemplation practice a try. See how it does for you. And as you travel along that journey, may you be deeply provisioned for it. Until next time, thanks for being with me. I love you. Bye-bye.